So hello everybody, so excited to be here today. I'm excited every time I'm actually here, but it seems like every time I'm just more and more excited, and it feels really good, particularly because as Dove shared, I had the opportunity to go to Utah over the weekend and spend a few days unplugging. And so over the next hour that I get to join with everyone, I'd like to share a little bit about this idea of unplugging. I was in Utah. I spent 3 days where the intention was to go within, be silent, and join with others with the same intention to share ideas of God, ideas of love, ideas of truth. Thursday before I left on the retreat, it was a typical morning at work, but certainly there was excitement knowing that on Thursday afternoon I would be getting on a plane to go to Utah and unplug. And so my day on Thursday consisted of what typically happens on a normal day, where I have a list of to-dos, things to take care of, things to align, things I needed to be that day, whether it was be the one in charge of an initiative or be the one to address a quote-unquote problem. I was getting or needing to get things, needed to get this report to be able to make that decision, to be able to do this. There was discovery of what needs to be done, didn't get done, and who's responsible. So as you can feel it, or I even feel it as I'm going through my day on Thursday, you can recognize a stream of thinking that most of the world engenders. So it's this thinking of constantly doing, judging, things to get, things to be. And so the idea of unplugging from all of this was really exciting to me. So I was watching the clock on Thursday, counting the minutes, counting the moments before I knew I would be able to leave the office and get on a plane to Utah. And this would be my second visit to Utah, second visit to the monastery. As Dove said, I am working on a film project where the intention is to really capture some of the experiential lessons of A Course in Miracles through its teachers and its students. So I had already been to the monastery, so I had some idea of what to expect, except that this time it was really intended to be a quiet weekend. So unlike the first time I had visited, where the intention was to make a film, to do something, this time it was really about unplugging and listening to silence. And so on the way to the airport, there was just more of this mental, worldly thinking, and the thoughts sounded like this: I gotta hurry up because I got an hour to make it to LAX. And if any of you have ever been to LA, you know the traffic I'm talking about. With only an hour to get to my flight, knowing I could have or should have already checked in, I'm still looking for a place to park. And so I'm with my partner. We're in the car and we're going to a new garage that we picked out at the airport, not knowing exactly the layout of the garage, where we would park, all the thinking of, oh my God, we're late. We're not going to make it to the plane. And then I started to get a little anxious about the choice we had made in the garage. And I didn't share this with my partner, but in my mind, I was prepared. It's so funny because the ego wants to start to blame and start to worry and start to find reason to separate oneself from the other. And so I started to think in my mind, well, did my partner pick the right parking garage? Are we going to make it? Maybe it's not close enough. Maybe the bus or the shuttle is not going to get there fast enough. So here's all this mental noise, egoic thinking. So we finally park, and the shuttle that takes us to the terminal wasn't there. So we had to wait a couple of more minutes. Now it's about 45 minutes before the flight's going to take off, and the worrying begins again. But the interesting thing about doing the course or doing this work is you recognize your capacity to just be at least aware of the thinking and not react to them. So although these thoughts were going in through my mind or appeared to be coming through my mind, I didn't have to react to them. So it was a wonderful learning opportunity and forgiving opportunity. So eventually the shuttle did come, and we get to the airport terminal. Now we got to go into the line to get checked on TSA. Now, if you've ever been to the terminal, then you know that TSA experience alone is probably enough for the ego to sink its teeth into. When we talk about blame, talk about frustration, oh boy, there's a lot there. So me knowing this and staying in awareness, we got to the TSA line. Now, I travel a lot, so I am also enrolled in a pre-screened program, which basically means that I can go to the head of the line, and if I'm randomly chosen, I can also go through TSA without getting checked, meaning I don't have to take off my shoes, I don't have to take out my laptop or remove my belt. And so that's a really good experience. And boy, did I need it now. Boy, did I need it in this moment where I was rushing to get to my plane. And so I go onto this TSA line, and I was rejected to go through the special, quote unquote, area where I didn't have to do all that. And on top of that, I was asked to get off of the line and go on another line, which was not familiar to me. And all of a sudden, I was on my edge. I had been doing so well. It seemed like my awareness was so like aware of the ego stream of thinking that I was not going to jump into. But in this moment now, it was just like this last point. But I held on tight. I held on tight with the recognition that nothing was wrong. Everything was okay. And so I went on that longer line and eventually went through. And again, the time is ticking. So we're about 20 minutes away from our flight taking off, getting out of TSA, rushing now to the terminal. Now, if you know anything about LAX, if you know anything about American Airlines terminal, there is a special terminal that regional flights fly out of. Now, the interesting thing about this special terminal, it's not attached to the main terminal, which means you need to take yet another shuttle. And we didn't have the time, or at least I didn't think we had the time, or at least I had the thought that we didn't have the time. I had the thought that we didn't have the time. But knowing that everything, all is perfect always, I didn't jump into it. I didn't jump into the stream. I was aware of the stream of thinking. I was aware of the thoughts that could get me into a position of suffering. I went along not interpreting the situation. Got on that extra shuttle bus that took me to this special terminal for the regional planes. Got up to the desk where I was supposed to check in. Now, mind you, everybody's boarding the plane now, which, by the way, I have to also mention that my ego mind was thinking, wait a second, I'm a platinum member, which means I'm supposed to get on this plane first. And now all these other people are ahead of me and getting in front of me. Boy, are they going to take up all the cabin space, all the luggage space. Where am I going to put my luggage? This ridiculous thought that there was actually a problem because I wasn't first. But I was fine. I saw those thoughts and I let them go by. Get to the desk, and the woman says, after reading our names, "Oh, I was calling you guys for the last 10, 15 minutes. Immediately, the big flag in my head, the ego flag, was like, okay, let me at him. Let me at him. It's ready. And I'm like, just watching it. I'm just watching it. And that ego thought, that fear is like, all it kept wanting to like say is that it's ruined. It's ruined. Someone took our seat is what I thought. And she said, I was trying to call you because I wanted to upgrade you. I wanted to upgrade you. And then all of a sudden, it was just like, of course. Of course. How could it be any different? How could it be any different than perfect? There was nothing wrong with anything about this whole process. There was nothing wrong about the ride to the airport or where we parked or the TSA. Everything was perfectly aligned. It didn't really matter. But boy, wasn't that a really nice confirmation or witness to the experience that everything was going to be okay. And so we were upgraded, and there we were flying to Utah. We arrived Thursday evening, drove from the Salt Lake City airport 2 hours, got to the site probably around 9 p.m.-ish, maybe a little late. Actually, I take that back. It was probably about 11-ish, so it was kind of on the late side. But got there, unwound from the day. And the real excitement. I was really excited about getting on the plane and getting to this place to unplug, but really the morning, the next day, was where the opening, if you will, the opening to a different stream of thoughts, a different stream of ideas became very apparent. You see, I woke up in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know where I was. I mean, yes, I'm in Utah, but I didn't even know the name of the town. I just followed directions. And boy, that was pretty. That was beautiful. I should probably do that more often. Follow inner guidance, follow directions. And so I woke up and you can hear the birds singing, as quiet as can be. And this weekend was going to be about stillness, about quietness and unplugging. And so I shared a little bit about the moments leading up to my trip because I think they symbolize the ego's obsession with the worries and the to-dos and things that got to get done, and this attack. It's really this attack on love and what's whole. And so unplugging is simply cutting off oneself from that thought stream. Now, the retreat is certainly a symbol of that unplugging, but we don't have to go on a retreat to unplug. The ego would probably have you think that that is something you need to do. You don't need to do that. We don't need to go to a retreat to unplug and not interpret the images of the world. However, in this experience of mine where I was going away and using this retreat as an opportunity to unplug, that was the case for me. And so it was nice to dismantle the normal thought stream of the ego that we encounter in everyday life. So being in this place, I can just be. I disconnected from my phone and from my computer. There were a lot of walks. And there was one walk in particular that symbolized for me the experience. Nearby the cabin where I slept, there was what was a stream, except it was dry. So if you could imagine these stones, big stones, and what was probably a stream that was 10 feet wide, perhaps, a little bigger. And this long stream went all the way to the edge of the canyon. And so what was at the end would be the fall, where the water would drop. And what was cool or interesting is that as I walked through this, there was no water. So I was walking over the rocks where water would typically be. And I was walking through there, and what was exposed to me were the rocks that I would not have seen had the water been running through this area, or what would be a stream. And so there were these beautiful river rocks. There were these crevices. And what was going through my mind was the beauty that I got to see while the water was not going through there. I could almost imagine where the water would fall, the dips, the curves, the white caps that would form because of the rock formation underneath. And then right at the edge where that water was falling down, I can see the rocks where the water would cover and drop, and I can see the drop, this empty space. And so I found that very symbolic of the experience being there, meaning minus the stream of ego thinking, there was something exposed I had not seen or had not dove deep enough to see. And so this weekend was about exposing those river rocks. It was exposing the inner self, the part of me or the aspect of me that is covered up, that is veiled over by the ego thinking and the ego stream of thought. So this experience of walking those rocks was so symbolic and stood out so much in my mind. It's like, wow, imagine what is revealed when we take that thought stream away. And needless to say, as I was in that experience, I also recognized the contrast of a mind heavily filled with ego thinking and a mind expanded in no thought, in meditation. We spent a lot of time meditating. We spent a lot of time joining. We shared. We didn't speak a lot. There were about 5 people in the group, very small group. We didn't speak a lot. There wasn't a lot of heavy talk, story talk. There was a lot of joining. And a lot of that joining didn't require words. The Course talks about how bodies could never really join. That joining is truly of the mind. And this experience of the weekend was, for me, a deepening of that understanding, that deepening of the joining of the mind. So whereas I, as a body, as a perceived body, could be in the presence of others, we share a common idea. And in that experience of sharing a common idea, as the Course would say, ideas grow stronger, I can feel. Now, this is where the Course teaching becomes experiential. I can feel the weightlessness that one mind, or the idea of one mind, can bring. And so, in the experience of joy, there really isn't a perception of a body. When there's an experience of joy, an experience of peace, it is without the sense of a body. And so in the shared idea of love, the shared idea of joy, of the joining, there was this wonderful sense of peace. And yes, it's like being in feel. It's like being in feel. And there was a lot of that this weekend. And even as I'm talking right now to everybody and sharing right now, I feel it with you. I feel it right now. Words would never come close to the actual experience, right? But if I had to choose words that would point in that direction, I can tell you, I feel a tingling. I feel wide, expanded, peaceful mind, a knowing of love. It goes beyond the computer that sits in front of me. It goes beyond the mic that sits in front of me and everything else going around me, as well as this coffee that I just have to take a sip of before my perceived throat goes dry. It goes beyond that. And so this weekend, going back to this weekend, was that. It was a deepening of the experience. It was a symbol or a witness to this journey that I'm on. A journey, of course, without distance. Because, I said this earlier, we don't have to go to a retreat. We certainly don't have to go away to unplug. What came up for me over the weekend was just don't interpret what's in front of you. Don't interpret what's in front of you. When I was rushing to the airport, there were all these interpretations. When I'm at work, you might as well just call me the interpreter because that's all I do. I interpret reports. I interpret behavior. I interpret people's feelings and their thoughts. I interpret what's successful. If we can let go of interpretation, something much wiser, something far more intelligent, something far more greater can expose itself. The Course says that God will build a bridge in a space, in that space, space left open for him. When we let go of our interpretation of the world and the images that we see, we open up that space for that bridge to our Father, to God, to love. And that's a bridge I like crossing. That's a bridge I want to cross. That's a bridge I want to cross. And so, for me, the obvious way of unplugging was the retreat, but certainly being back now, the way for me to unplug is to be here with you. Certainly meditation, certainly using the Course as a guide to practicing the principles, using the teachings. That said, you need do nothing. Really. The Course talks about you need do nothing, right? So I suppose if we're not interpreting the world and we're creating space for a bridge to be built to love and we're allowing love to come through, then we're supported and the wisdom will guide us. So the retreat can actually be with us at all times, right? The retreat or the unplugging can be with us at all times. By the way, the other thought, let me mention, that came to me was, I've built this story up as an unplugging, that I am unplugging from the world or the worldly thinking. But in truth, it's more like I'm plugging in to what's real. And when I'm plugged into what's real, I need do nothing. I need do nothing because everything's handled, everything's perfect as it is. I'd like to take a moment to read parts of Lesson 49, which is God's voice speaks to me all through the day. A part of this weekend spent in Utah was really listening. And there were some profound things that came to me. I shared one of them, which is, just stop interpreting, right? And the other one was, the other thing that came up for me is, you don't trust God. You don't trust God. And I thought about that for a moment. There was some offense taken. Of course, that was my ego. But in truth, I guess that's what happens when you have an ego, right? The ego doesn't want to trust God. So there's a lot of little messages like that came to me that were so simple yet very profound and deep. So I this listening to the voice, this listening to God, this listening to Spirit, I'd like to just share lesson 49, which says, God's voice speaks to me all through the day. It is quite possible to listen to God's voice all through the day without interrupting your regular activities in any way. So this goes back to what I shared, which is you don't have to go to a retreat. We don't have to go to a retreat. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with the retreat. That's not to say that I'd in some way, shape, or form find value in this retreat. That's not to say that this retreat doesn't symbolize something very profound. It's only to remember that we can still go about our regular activities and listen to the voice of God. The Course continues. The part of your mind in which truth abides is in constant communication with God, whether you are aware of it or not. It is the other part of your mind that functions in the world and obeys the world's laws. It is this part that is constantly distracted, disorganized, and highly uncertain. So, what the first paragraph is basically saying is, God's talking to you all the time. So I'm always really plugged into God. There's nothing really to power up. I'm connected. That bridge is already built. But my capacity to experience what God is saying, my capacity to cross that bridge is dependent on my ability to not be distracted by this worldly stream of thinking, not interpret the world, not get upset because I believe there's a parking lot that was better than another, or a parking space that was more appropriate, or a shuttle bus that wasn't moving fast enough, or a ticket agent that gave away my seat, or whatever it is. Paragraph 2, the part that is listening to the voice of God is calm, always at rest and wholly certain. There it is. It's calm, always at rest and wholly certain. So I know the voice that's yelling at me that I'm in trouble, the voice that's yelling at me that I have things to do, the voice that's yelling at me that's saying, you better get this, and that done. That's not the voice of God. Because that's certainly not a voice that's calm. Certainly not at rest and wholly certain. The Course continues. It is really the only part there is. The other part is a wild illusion, frantic and distraught, but without reality of any kind. So the Course is basically saying, not only are you caught up in this voice that seems to block out the voice of God, but it ain't even real. The Course asks, try today not to listen to it. Try to identify with the part of your mind where stillness and peace reign forever. Try to hear God's voice call to you lovingly, reminding you that your Creator has not forgotten His Son. Paragraph 4. Listen in deep silence. Be very still and open your mind. Go past all the raucous shrieks and sick imagings that cover your real thoughts and obscure your eternal link with God. Sink deep into peace that waits for you beyond the frantic, righteous thoughts and sights and sounds of this insane world. You do not live here. We are trying to reach your real home. We are trying to reach the place where you are truly welcome. We are trying to reach God. And so the retreat certainly symbolizes my desire to reach God. It was a symbol and witness to the journey which has no distance that I am on. My commitment to be vigilant for God. My commitment to listening to a voice that promises and delivers. A voice that promises and delivers. How do I know that it delivers? Because I experience joy and peace when I am talking about it, when I am thinking it, when I'm aligned with that thought system, when I am seeing possibility, when I'm seeing love, I feel and I experience the world different. There's no denying it. I can't deny it. By the world's viewpoint, I actually may be quite crazy. And boy, crazy feels really good. Crazy feels really good.